Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskaram. Welcome to another lecture on Siddendra Yogi. In the last lecture, we have seen who is Siddendra Yogi, why he is regarded as the father of Kuchipudi, and much before Siddendra Yogi has come into the picture of Kuchipudi Bhagavata Mela tradition, what did the Brahmin men of this Krishna belt actually perform? And why is the Kalapa Prakriya and especially the Bhama Kalapam so important for the Kuchipudi dance drama tradition? Now moving forward in this lecture, we will also see few more other legends of Siddendra Yogi which have been opined by various scholars from the literary and the dance fields. Now the fourth legend of Siddendra Yogi is that Siddendra Yogi's origin is clueless, which means we actually don't know who his parents are or to which part of the country that he belongs to. But one thing for sure is that he came to this particular area which is called as now Kuchipudi, which was very vibrant with young men performing stories of God and dancing and moving from one place to the other by singing the lores of God, who were called as Kuchigalu or Kushilavas. Now when Siddendra Yogi came to this particular place, he rested near the banks of the river Bhima, which is to the north of the Kuchipudi village now. Now when he rests under a tree near the banks of the Bhima river, he watches a few young Brahmin boys approaching towards him near the river bank by reciting the shlokas from the Vedic scriptures. Siddendra Yogi is very much, he was very much happy, and to see the way these young boys were reciting the verses from the Vedic scriptures, their recitation, their modulation, and the spashtata, which is the clarity that they had in the diction, was very impressive. Siddendra Yogi was very impressed by the way the young boys looked and the way they had their modulation and diction. And he asked as to what part or which region do these young boys belong to. And they said that, we live in this same place, and this is where we reside, and this is what we do. Siddendra Yogi, who has already composed Bhama Kalapam, taking into account Krishna as the Paramatma and Satyabhama as the Jivatma, wanted actually young boys to learn this so that they would take it forward. And he taught this Bhama Kalapam to these young boys, which is a Shringara Prabandha. And then he took an oath from them that he would pass on this art form to the next generations, to the family members, to the young boys who are born into that family, and they would perform this Bhama Kalapam. Now here certain things are very common in all the legends that you see, that Siddendra Yogi is teaching Bhama Kalapam to the young boys, and then he takes an oath from them that they would definitely pass on this to the next generations. This is a very common thing that you see in all the legends that are ascribed to Siddendra Yogi's life and time. Now another legend that we see, which is very commonly heard, and probably most of you who have done your certificate or diploma courses in Kuchipudi dance have also learnt this, that Siddendra Yogi's Purvashrama, before he became a sannyasi, his Purvashrama name was Siddhaya, and he belonged to the traditional family of Chinta, which is one of the 15 traditional families of the Kuchipudi region. And Siddhaya was a very slow learner from a very young age. All right. He had no inclination or intention to study anything, do any work. He was absolutely very lethargic in nature. And but his elders thought that if he gets married, he would probably get some responsibility in life and start doing some job or work to take care of his family that would come from him eventually. And then he was married to a girl from the surname Bhagavatula, who is also a traditional family name from the Kuchipudi dance village. Now, after his marriage also, he was the same lethargic, easy-to-go boy. And he had to face a lot of discrimination in his village, that he is fit for nothing, he has nothing to do in his life. Even though he got married, he has no responsibilities as such. And Siddhaya, what he does, he runs away from his house, and he thought that it's better to leave this place, get something valuable in life, and then come back and lead the life. Because if he continues staying there, he would be more discriminated and insulted. So what he does, he runs away from the village and he goes to Kashi. As I said in the last lecture, there were two important centers in India. North, it was Kashi, and south, it was Udupi for educational purposes. Now he runs away to Kashi, and there in Kashi, he learns all the Vedas and the Shastras under a guru. Now, after learning all the scriptures and becoming well educated, he comes back to his village. He starts to his village. And from Kashi, when he has to come back to his village, he has to cross the Krishna river. And during those times, it is only through a boat journey that you could cross the river. There are no bridges as such, or the roadway. There is no transportation facility as such. So when he is traveling to pass through the Krishna river to get back to the other bank, where the Kuchipudi village is located, near the Kolluru village, there is a huge storm. People warn him that it's not safe to travel further and he better stops it and gets down at a certain place, and after the storm is over, he can probably again travel back. But he doesn't take care of that warnings, and he starts traveling in that storm because he's very excited to meet his family. And especially because he was, at a very young age, he wants to actually meet his wife, who's also has turned out into a beautiful young girl. And what happens is, he is stuck in the storm in the Krishna river, and he is very much now frightened with the way the boat is twirling around, sort of a whirlpool in the river, and he is now scared to death. So what Siddendra Yogi does is, he takes Atura Sannyasam, which means he prays to Krishna and says that if you save me from this disastrous storm, a very dreadful storm, I will take sannyasam and I will dedicate my entire life in your service. And very miraculously, without his knowledge, he is just thrown to the bank of the Krishna river with life. And after he comes to senses, he sees that he comes back to life, and then he sets up a small ashram near the banks of the Krishna river, and with his immense bhakti for Krishna, he composes the Bhama Kalapam. And to the young boys of his village Kuchipudi, he teaches the Bhama Kalapam in the ashrama that he has set up. After his sannyas ashrama, he becomes Siddendra Yogi, and then he continues teaching Bhama Kalapam, and of course takes an oath from these young boys that they will also continue teaching that to their next generations and has to be a family tradition. Now this story is, or this legend is told by Shri Pasumarthi Adinarayana Garu, who also belongs to the traditional families of Kuchipudi, which is a very, very famous story that many people would have known. Now there is another legend of Siddendra Yogi, which has a few documentational evidences in terms of Narahari Tirtha is concerned, and a few philosophical influences that we see in the text of Bhama Kalapam. The legend goes like this: Siddendra Yogi's Purvashrama name was Siddhappa, and he belonged to the Kuchipudi village, but he was an orphan. So, and the neighbors and the other people in the village show a lot of empathy on Siddhappa, and he gets married at a very young age to a 6-month-old girl. All right, back then, during the olden times, men and women used to get married at a very, very young age. All right, you can't even imagine, you won't even believe that there was a certain period of time when a 3-year-old boy and the 3-year-old girl were also married to each other. And later, when the girl attains puberty, she is sent to her in-laws' place to consummate the marriage and then live with her family of her husband. So Siddhappa was married to at a young age to a 6-month-old girl, and Siddhappa, right from the very young age, he was very interested in dance and music. So whenever there used to be a dance or a music presentation, whenever these Puchigalu of this village used to just go perform everywhere, the Krishna Leelas or the Shiva Leelas, he used to also travel with them and just listen to them and be a part of it and just watch them perform. And he was very interested in music and dance. But similarly, like the earlier story, he was not very much inclined towards education, but very much interested in dance and music. And he didn't work much because he was an orphan. He was just not having a lot of responsibilities as such. His wife is a very months-old baby, and so he was also ridiculed by his villagers that now that you are married, you have to do something, you have to just take your life seriously at a very young age and all. So what he does, he runs away from the house, but unlike in the earlier story, he goes to the nearby place called as Srikakulam. If you remember, students, in the earlier lectures we discussed about the importance of Srikakulam, which was the capital of the Shatavahanas for a longer period of time, the exact place where Andhra Mahavishnu temple was there, and in the same temple where Krishnadevaraya has written Amukta Malyada, and all these, so many Devadasis were attached to that temple and all. So the same Srikakulam, he lands up after running away from his village. Now what happens? This Srikakulam, or this entire belt of coastal Andhra and including the Orissa region, at that time it was ruled by the Kalinga Ganga dynasty. We also talked about Kalinga Ganga dynasty in the Natya Nritya in the Andhra region. Now the Kalinga Ganga dynasty, what happened? If you parallelly look at the life history of Madhvacharya and Narahari Tirtha, which is written by a very, very great scholar of Dvaita philosophy, Shri B.N.K. Sharma Garu, he says that Madhvacharya has sent Narahari Tirtha, his very prominent disciple, direct disciple, to the Kalinga Ganga dynasty ruler and to give him a Rama, Sita, Lakshmana, Hanuma Pratima, or that Madhvacharya wanted to give the king of the Kalinga Ganga dynasty. So he sent it through his disciple Narahari Tirtha. Now what happened when Narahari Tirtha went to the Kalinga Ganga dynasty to meet the king and give the idol that his guru Madhvacharya wanted to give it to the king? It so happened that the king of the Kalinga Ganga dynasty expired due to some health issues. And the prince who had to be the king was extremely young, who is not eligible to get on to the throne of being the king. There are certain age restrictions for boys to become a king. Now that prince, the crowning prince, is too young to be a king. Now what the royal families do, that when the king passes away and when the crowning prince is extremely young, not eligible to as of now become the king, they choose a particular person to rule the administrative responsibilities or to take care of the administrative responsibilities until the crowning prince gets on to a certain age where he can become a king. So when Narahari Tirtha went to the Kalinga Ganga dynasty, there was an elephant that was sent in the area where the dynasty was ruling, and it is the elephant that will put the garland to a person by God's grace who it feels that will be the administrative head until the prince becomes the king. Now they believe that the elephant will garland the right person as a sign of God. Now it so happened that this elephant has garlanded Narahari Tirtha. Narahari Tirtha said that I am a sannyasi. Now I am not eligible to be a king and take off the administrative powers. But with the consent of his guru Madhvacharya and with the request of the royal families, he said, I will not be a king. I will just be there to take care of the administrative things that are happening, and I will also teach the crowning prince a lot of Vedas and Shastras and many other knowledge systems so that he would be adept with everything the moment he comes to a certain age. And it so happened that almost for 13 years or 14 years, he was taking care of the administrative powers of the Kalinga Ganga dynasty. And this Kalinga Ganga dynasty, where its central location is in the now Orissa region, there the Gita Govindam of Jayadeva was very famous. Now, you see Madhvacharya or Narahari Tirtha or Purandara Dasa, who all belong to the same bucket of philosophers, the way they spread Krishna Bhakti is not just through religion but also through performances, through music, dance and theatre. So Narahari Tirtha also wanted to spread Krishna Bhakti through the performances of Gita Govindam of Jayadeva. Alright, and it so happened that during the administrative sessions, exactly parallelly during the time when Siddhappa ran away from the Kuchipudi village and landed at Srikakulam, Narahari Tirtha and his disciple Gopalakrishna Saraswati, who is also a saint poet by himself, also were there in the Srikakulam in a monastery that is said by Narahari Tirtha. And they also got with them some artists of Gita Govindam of Jayadeva to perform everywhere in the Andhra region also to spread Krishna Bhakti and also to spread what is good and what is bad. Siddhappa, who was naturally inclined to music, dance and theatrical performances, was so excited to see the Gita Govindam performances by these artists who have come along with Narahari Tirtha from the Kalinga Ganga dynasty. And then he stayed in the same monastery that is set up by Narahari Tirtha. Now the inscriptional and the epigraphical evidences that Narahari Tirtha's visit to Srikakulam are, we can see a lot of inscriptions on the temple walls in the north part of Andhra, in many temples of Srikakulam, and also in the Simhachalam temple in the Vishakhapatnam. And in the Srikakulam, you have this Sri Kurmam temple and Arasivilli temple, where you have inscriptional evidences of Narahari Tirtha visiting the entire Andhra belt, traveling from the Kalinga Ganga dynasty to spread the Krishna Bhakti in all these areas and also for administrative purposes. So, we have inscriptional evidences of Narahari Tirtha's visit during those times. And Siddhappa stays in that same monastery, and then Narahari Tirtha understands Siddhappa's inclination towards Krishna Bhakti and his interest towards dance, music and theatre, and he sends Siddhappa to the Udupi Krishna Mutt, which is there in the Karnataka, where he would get trained and educated there for the years to come. And that is how Siddhappa was sent to the Udupi Mutt, alright, in the Karnataka state, which is now called as Karnataka. and he learns about Krishna Bhakti, different Vedas, different Shastras, different Puranas. And then, after getting enough education, he comes back to the Kuchipudi village. Now, this story is accepted not just by B.N.K. Sharma Garu, Advaita philosophy great scholar, but also is said in the documentations by Dr. Sunil Kothari, Dr. Chinta Ramanathan Garu, and Shri Chintalapati Lakshmi Narasimha Shastri Garu in the various books that they have written. Now, after Siddhappa wanted to come back to his village, the same episode is believed to happen where he is there in the storm in the Krishna river, and then he takes sannyasam and he is thrown to the banks of the river. He reaches his home and he sees his wife, and his wife realizes that he has taken sannyasam, and then he sets up an ashram, and he becomes a Siddendra Yogi. From Siddhappa, his sannyas ashrama name is Siddendra, and because he was a saint poet, the Yogi suffix has come. And then he authors Bhama Kalapam, thinking himself to be Satyabhama and the Krishna to be Paramatma. He was at a very right age, a very young right age to be with his wife, but the urge that he had, the love that he had, he converted that into a Shringara Prabandha Kavyam called as Bhama Kalapam, where he himself imagined to be Satyabhama, pining for love for Krishna, and Krishna is the Paramatma and Satyabhama is the Jivatma. And then, when you see the text of Bhama Kalapam, the philosophy that is being taught as an undercurrent in Bhama Kalapam, there is a lot of Dvaita philosophy that we see when Satyabhama is shown as Jivatma and Krishna is shown as Paramatma. The Kuchipudi villagers are Vaidiki Brahmins, and inherently they follow Adi Shankaracharya's Advaita Siddhanta. And what does Advaita Siddhanta say? It talks about Aham Brahmasmi, which means the Jivatma and the Paramatma are the same. It resides in the person. I am the Jivatma and the Paramatma is also inside me. But Bhama Kalapam doesn't talk about that. Bhama Kalapam says that Jivatma is different, Paramatma is different, and above the Jivatma, and it is the Jivatma who has to continuously work hard in terms of psychological, mental, spiritual balance, removing ego and pride from their understanding, and always strive to reach the Paramatma. This is exactly what is the crux of Dvaita philosophy. And when you see every detailing of Bhama Kalapam, you see a perfect definition of Dvaita philosophy in terms of the story plot, in terms of the characterization, in terms of the way how the Jivatma is trying to attain Paramatma, how Madhavi is trying to come into picture as a transgender to unite the Jivatma and Paramatma by slowly removing the ego of Satyabhama layer by layer. Everything is exactly according to the philosophy that is told in the Dvaita Siddhanta by Sri Madhvacharya. Because Siddendra Yogi had his education in the Udupi Mutt and had a lot of influence of Dvaita Siddhanta in his education, and because he was also influenced by the Gita Govindam of Jayadeva, you see a very clear marks of Dvaita philosophy and the Gita Govinda philosophy in the Bhama Kalapam. One very interesting thing about Bhama Kalapam, why it became very popular, is because people could connect to Bhama Kalapam very well. It is, of course, the story of Krishna and Satyabhama, who are king and queen. But the way in which Krishna and Satyabhama are showcased is just like a regular husband and wife. A quarrel that happens between a husband and wife, which is so natural, is shown with the characters of Satyabhama and Krishna. So every common man and women could connect easily to the character of Satyabhama and Krishna. So the moment when audience connect to the characters very well, it becomes very easy for them to accept the story that is happening. That is why sometimes when we exaggerate certain things in a story, there are questions that pop up asking, how can this be humanly possible? It is not humanly possible, so how can that do? But when it comes to Bhama Kalapam, even though the hero and the heroine are gods, or the hero and heroine are royals, but still they are showcased as a common husband and wife, and the quarrel is very, very basic. But still there is a lot of philosophical understanding that is there in Bhama Kalapam, which you will understand when you observe it closely. And that is the main success of Bhama Kalapam, and it is being presented uninterruptedly since more than 500 years, and it is still a success. Can you imagine any performance being constantly performed for 500 years without any interruption and is still a success? Yes, Bhama Kalapam is an example to that. People are not still bored of Bhama Kalapam because the varied emotions that are shown in Bhama Kalapam, the spectrum of colors that the characterization of Satyabhama has are so splendid that every time you watch a Bhama Kalapam, you are like, yes, I'm able to connect to Satyabhama. I'm able to connect to what Madhavi is trying to say. I'm able to connect with the emotion that Krishna wants to showcase through the character of Satyabhama. And a lot of Dvaita philosophy is infused into the literary aspect of Bhama Kalapam. And that is why we see Satyabhama as a Prakriti and Krishna as a Purusha. The Bhama Bhakti or the Madhura Bhakti was an important aspect of Bhama Kalapam of Siddendra Yogi, especially because he was also a product of the medieval Bhakti movement that flourished during the period of the peaks of Vaishnavism. Alright, and he taught through Bhama Kalapam the Kalapa Prakriya to these Brahmin young boys and took an oath from them that every boy born in the traditional family will learn Bhama Kalapam, pierce his ears, perform at least once in his lifetime the entire Bhama Kalapam in the Ramalingeshwara Swami temple in the presence of the idol that is there in the Sanctum Sanctorum. Now, he was also very skeptical about the acceptance of Brahmin young boys performing a Sringara Prabandha in front of the open public. So what did Siddendra Yogi do? He also got a letter from the Udupi Mutt, from the gurus, that it is a good thing to perform Bhama Kalapam because it is not just a theatrical performance, but it is a philosophical discourse that any saints would give to the people. Is it wrong to sit on a public platform and give philosophical discourses or religious discourses? It is not wrong. Similarly, Bhama Kalapam is also a philosophical discourse, but of course presented in a theatrical way so that people would understand it much better. Now take a group of commoners who have no formal education and who cannot understand the great intricacies of Telugu language. Now, if you even recite shlokas or talk poems in front of them, they wouldn't understand and benefit from it. But if you show it in a theatrical format, they would enjoy it, understand it, get entertained by it, remember it, and probably follow that in their life. And which is the actual, which is the actual reason why drama came into picture in the lives of the people, if we also see the mythological origins of Natya Shastra. So he has also gotten a permission from the head of the Udupi Mutt that these Brahmins boys can perform Bhama Kalapam, and it is not a wrong thing to perform a Sringara Prabandha because it is infused with philosophical discourses in it. Now these young boys who were called as Kuchilu or Kuchigallu, they were taught the Bhama Kalapam by Siddendra Yogi, who set up an ashram on the banks of the river, and he continued teaching until the end of his life. And this Kushilavapuri has eventually become Kuchipudi. Now, the oral legends and Kuchipudi traditional families believe since hundreds of years that the author of Bhama Kalapam is Siddendra Yogi. This is the strong belief by the inhabitants of the Kuchipudi village, which has passed on in the Guru Sishya Parampara to all the Kuchipudi dancers. But as I said before, because it is almost more than 500 to 600 years that this text has come into picture, there are a lot of changes that the other poets or the performers have made to the text of Bhama Kalapam. Because one thing with the Yakshagana Prakriya or the Kalapa Prakriya is that you can make spontaneous changes, innovations in the text depending upon the situation in which you are presenting. Because of that, sometimes the text gets changed or manipulated. So there are a lot of changes that happen, and probably the text that is used today is not completely written by Siddendra Yogi, or rather only a few pieces of text is just originally belongs to Siddendra Yogi, and probably 95% of the text has changed. So this is all about the different legends that are there on Siddendra Yogi, who is considered the father and the progenitor of Kuchipudi dance, and how the philosophy has influenced his text and his mind, and how music, dance and theatre played a very important role in his life, and that made him write a Bhama Kalapam, introduce a new genre of literature called as Kalapa Prakriya, which was not there before Siddendra Yogi, and which is exclusive to the Kuchipudi dance drama tradition, and how Bhama Kalapam became so famous, also eventually making the Kuchipudi Bhagavatulu also very famous. So this is all about the different legends that are there on Siddendra Yogi. In the next lecture, we will see about Bhama Kalapam. Until then, Namaskaram.